On the day of Victoria and my 7th anniversary, a piece of news shot to the top of the trending list. It read, "The first star discovered by astronomer Victoria has been named after the person she loves the most." Victoria commented under the news, "In your name the star shines. Even in the universe you are never alone." I was deeply moved until I saw the official name of the star, Ethan. I was speechless. "My name is Sincere. Jason, I've decided to take the position at the Paris branch," I said. Before I finished my sentence, Jason, my childhood friend and business partner, jumped in from the other end of the phone. "Are you serious about going to Paris? What about Victoria? If you come back in 2 days, I'll personally hunt you down with a knife." I chuckled lightly and replied, "I'm not joking. After everything I saw tonight, there's no turning back. If I do come back halfway, I'll bring my own head to see you." 3 years ago, our company needed someone to develop business overseas. After discussing it with Victoria and seeing no objections from her, I volunteered for the position. But on the 3rd day after I left, Victoria was hospitalized with severe stomach pain, and I flew back overnight to care for her. Since then, I had stayed at our headquarters, unwilling to leave her side again. Victoria and I dated for 5 years and have been married for 7. From the moment I met her in high school, I knew she was the kind of person who could immerse herself entirely in her passion, often to the point of forgetting to eat or sleep. If I worked abroad, we'd barely see each other, and I couldn't bear to leave her alone. After we got married, friends often asked me how I managed to be with someone as career-driven and seemingly unconcerned with family life as Victoria. They said someone like her wasn't suited for marriage. I always smiled and answered, "Because she saved me, both my body and my soul. Due to issues in my family growing up, I developed a depression. At my lowest point, when I was ready to sink completely into the abyss, it was Victoria who jumped in to save me. She stayed by my side, taking me to therapy session after session, never missing a single one, no matter the weather. After I improved, I once asked her, 'Weren't you afraid? You were so young back then?' She waved her hand dismissively and smiled. I couldn't bear to watch someone with such a handsome smile leave this world. Besides, the future is long. I want to explore it with you, laughing all the way." Her words were like music from heaven to me at the time. I thought to myself, Victoria is such a wonderful person. Surely we can walk through life together. But fantasies are always beautiful, while reality is often cruel. Today was supposed to be our 7th wedding anniversary. I had reserved the restaurant where I proposed, prepared fireworks, and planned to surprise her. I even left work early to wait for her outside her research institute. But instead of seeing her, I saw the trending news. It read, "The latest discovery in astronomy, planet number 960,306, officially named Ethan, was announced this morning. This is the first planet discovered by astronomer Victoria, making it highly significant." The top comment under the post was from Victoria herself. "In your name the star shines. Even in the universe you are never alone." The accompanying picture was of Victoria and Ethan, their faces close together in a cozy French restaurant. Ethan held up the certificate naming the star. When I clicked on the comments, Ethan's reply had the most likes. "Sharing private romance with the world. Thank you, Vicky, you've made me so happy." As I read the post, I couldn't begin to describe how I felt. It was as if I had fallen into an endless abyss, darkness surrounding me, blinding and suffocating. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't escape. I could only let myself drown in the shadows. At that moment, I thought, the Victoria who saved me back then could never have imagined that one day she would be the reason my depression returned. Life isn't a multiple-choice question, and I was never the fixed answer to her equation. Just as tears were about to spill over, I turned off my phone screen, blinking away the stinging sensation in my eyes. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat and drove to the restaurant I had reserved. Under the dazzling fireworks, I ate 2 steaks alone, a small ceremony to mark the end of nearly 7 years of marriage with Victoria. "Sincere, I'll arrange for your accommodation in Paris. How about leaving next Monday?" That gives you a week to prepare." Jason must have sensed my prolonged silence as he tentatively broke the quiet. I couldn't help but laugh at his cautious tone. Jason had been a witness to my entire relationship with Victoria, from the beginning until now. He must have picked up on my unusual attitude toward her and realized something was wrong. A week, enough time to wrap up my work here and say a proper goodbye to Victoria and the youth I had spent the last decade with. "All right," I replied softly, gazing at the moonlight outside the window. This time Jason was certain there was a serious problem between Victoria and me. Though he didn't know exactly what had happened, he knew that for me, someone who loved Victoria more than life itself, to act this way, it had to be something significant. After much thought, Jason tried to console me with a philosophical tone. "The world is vast, filled with delicious food and fascinating people. If you're willing to move forward, the future holds endless possibilities. Tomorrow is July 1st, a new beginning. The Paris branch will start operations in a week. Brother, even without a woman, I still have my career." The evening breeze rustled the curtains on the balcony, producing a soft, whispering sound. I pulled out a pack of cigarettes from my pocket, walked toward the balcony, and gazed up at the bright moon. Striking the lighter, I lit a cigarette with a crisp click that echoed sharply in the stillness of the night. Smoke rings floated from my lips, dissipating into the air, while scenes from the day replayed vividly in my mind. A pang of pain seized my heart, but at that moment I finally made up my mind. I spoke aloud. "Jason, you were right. Even without a woman, I still have my career." After hanging up the phone, I turned to the moon and confessed, "Victoria, I'm going to let you and him be." When Victoria returned, she immediately noticed me standing on the balcony. Lost in thought, she slipped into her house slippers and walked toward me. Seeing the cigarette in my hand, she paused for a moment but said nothing. Although I had already heard her footsteps, I continued with what I was doing. Since we started dating, I had quit smoking because Victoria disliked the smell. It would wrinkle her nose and irritate her throat. To keep her happy, I had forced myself to quit, even suffering withdrawal symptoms at one point. But not this time. I wouldn't compromise anymore. Victoria handed me a gift box casually, saying, "Here's your anniversary gift. Sorry, I had to stay late at work tonight and forgot to let you know." I replied indifferently, "It's fine." Taking my final drag, I extinguished the cigarette, reached out to take the box, and opened it. Inside was a watch, its face adorned with a small star. Curling my lips into a faint smile, I closed the box nonchalantly and said, "I like the gift, thanks." Victoria froze, her words of explanation caught in her throat. She looked at me, surprised by my calm demeanor. She had expected me to press her for answers, to demand an explanation. I, too, had thought I would be furious after seeing that trending topic and would question her angrily, leading to a heated argument and an unhappy ending. As I reached for a second cigarette, Victoria snatched the lighter from my hand. Frowning slightly, she said in displeasure, "Didn't I tell you to quit smoking?" She wasn't truly angry about the smoking. No. What unsettled her was my unnervingly calm demeanor. It made her anxious. I replied, "The urge just hit me." I carelessly put the cigarette back in its box and prepared to head to bed. But Victoria grabbed my wrist, her gaze complicated. "Today is our anniversary," she said. I looked at her, puzzled, and? Her brows knitted tighter, her grip on my wrist unconsciously tightening as well. Biting her lip, she said, "You didn't even prepare a gift, and now you're going to bed so early?" As she spoke, she leaned into me, stood on tiptoe, and began unbuttoning my shirt. Her lips brushed against my chin, moving toward my mouth. Just as our lips were about to meet, I turned my head, dodging the kiss. Her kiss landed on my cool chin instead. She murmured, "Sincere." Her palms were warm as she began undoing her own blouse. Her voice was husky, her eyes smoldering with desire as she looked up at me. In her mind, my behavior was nothing more than me sulking over something that had happened earlier. She thought that by taking the initiative, I would quickly forgive her and be happy again. With that thought, her hands slipped under my shirt, her lips pressing against me once more, trying to coax me. I frowned deeply and pushed her away forcefully. My gaze was as dark and unfathomable as a deep lake. Stumbling back, Victoria hit the balcony railing, a sharp pain shooting through her back. She looked at me in disbelief. Sincere. Why? I couldn't deny it. Victoria was a master of seduction. In the past, during our intimate moments, I would easily lose myself in the web of tenderness she wove. But now my attention was fixated on the lingering scent of men's cologne on her. A woody fragrance, the same cologne Ethan often wore. I took a step back and said flatly, "You must be tired from work. Get some rest." Without waiting for her response, I left her standing there, picked up my phone, and went to wash up. When I lay down on the bed, ready to sleep, Victoria entered the room holding my phone. I frowned slightly. I had thought that after rejecting her tonight, she would sulk and sleep in the guest room. Clutching the blanket, I moved toward the edge of the bed, a gesture that seemed to cut Victoria deeply. She asked, "Sincere, what's with you avoiding me? And why did you change our photo on your phone's lock screen to a countdown calendar?" She held the lit-up screen in front of me, demanding an explanation. I glanced at it briefly and replied calmly, "It's nothing. Just thought I'd switch things up." Victoria stood by the bed, staring at me for a long time. I snatched the phone from her hand, shoved it under the pillow, and closed my eyes, feigning sleep. After a while, she picked up her pillow, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door behind her. I opened my eyes and turned on my phone, looking at the countdown displayed on the lock screen. On the left side of the countdown, small words read, 7 days until departure. If she really cared, she would have noticed just now that I was planning to leave. But alas, her heart had already changed. I put down the phone and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, I got out of bed. I gathered all the mementos of our relationship from the master bedroom, intending to throw them away on my way out. In the walk-in closet, I pulled out my tailored suits from their garment bags. They took up too much space, so I grabbed a pair of scissors and cut the suits into pieces, stuffing them into several bags. Then, carrying 2 thick wedding albums, I went to the backyard. I wanted to burn them while the neighborhood was still quiet. The blaze illuminated my face, its flickering light reflecting off my impassive expression as I watched the wedding photo album, once filled with smiles and shared memories, turn to ash. "Victoria, what are you doing?" Sincere's sharp voice pierced through the crackling flames. Victoria, startled by the fire, had come out to investigate, only to find me burning our wedding photos. She shot me a bewildered glance, her voice trembling as she repeated, "What are you doing?" "Nothing," I replied calmly, sparing her only a fleeting look. Victoria's face turned crimson with frustration at my indifference. She hesitated for a moment before desperately trying to salvage the barely intact photos from the fire. But the intense heat forced her to withdraw her hand, her eyes now reddened with tears. "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. I didn't answer. I merely looked at her for a moment before turning and heading back inside. By the time I finished, dawn had fully broken. I decided to take a shower and get ready for work. Victoria followed me into the master bedroom, her eyes widening in shock as she noticed the now empty closet and the shredded remains of my suits scattered on the floor. When I stepped out of the bathroom, freshly dressed, I found her crouched on the floor, piecing together fragments of her wedding dress. I ignored her and walked out to the balcony, lighting a cigarette. "It's fine," she said after a pause. "The wedding photo style from 7 years ago is outdated anyway. When we have time, we can retake new ones." I wasn't sure if she was trying to convince me or herself to accept the fact that I'd destroyed what little remained of our shared memories. Either way, it didn't matter to me anymore. Victoria folded the suit scraps neatly and left the master bedroom. When I walked out moments later, I found her, surprisingly, cooking breakfast in the kitchen. For a brief second, I was stunned. Victoria, cooking? That was something I'd only learned about through Ethan's social media posts. Ethan loved documenting his life. Every time Victoria did something for him, he'd post about it, how she made him his favorite spicy noodles when they worked late, how she personally picked him up from work on rainy days, or how she always prepared thoughtful gifts for his birthdays and holidays. And then there was the recent trending topic, the night Ethan jokingly said he wanted a star, and Victoria, ever accommodating, had one named after him. That night, in a self-inflicted spiral of pain, I'd repeatedly scrolled through Ethan's posts, revisiting every story of their journey from acquaintances to whatever they were now. I couldn't stop reading about the special treatment Victoria reserved for him. "Breakfast is ready, Sincere," Victoria called out, her voice light. "I made your favorite millet porridge." She had composed herself, acting as if nothing had happened. She tugged me over to the dining table, smiling as she gestured for me to sit. I picked up the spoon, took one sip of the porridge, and put it down. Victoria noticed and asked, puzzled, "What's wrong? Why aren't you eating?" "I only like my millet porridge sweet," I said softly. "I once heard that sweet things stimulate the release of dopamine, so I've always had a sweet tooth." Victoria froze for a moment before quickly trying to remedy the situation. "There are some fried eggs in the kitchen. I'll grab them for you." I shook my head. "Don't bother. I'm in a rush." Ethan had posted something yesterday. Vicky promised to bring me breakfast tomorrow, fried eggs and millet porridge with meat. As I stood to leave, Victoria grabbed my arm, her brows furrowed tightly. "You're upset, aren't you? Just because I didn't spend yesterday with you? I told you, it was a last-minute work commitment. I've already apologized. The research is nearing its final stage, and as the project lead, I can't just focus on personal matters. Haven't you always supported my work?" Yes, that's how it had always been. I loved her, so I endured everything. Even when she was so busy she forgot my birthday, our anniversaries, or stayed out for days on end, I said nothing. I knew this was her dream, until that one time. She'd completed a major project and had come to my office to wait for me to finish work. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, and the woman who found replying to messages too much trouble was now typing away with a bright smile on her face. That was the first time I heard her mention Ethan's name. A clumsy but endearing junior, she called him. It was also the first time I realized she wasn't averse to messaging. She just didn't think I was worth the effort. I pulled my hand from hers, my gaze steady and emotionless. "I'm tired, Victoria. After all these years, I'm done." Before I could finish my sentence, her phone rang. The ringtone was one she'd set exclusively for Ethan. Without even glancing at the screen, she answered, her tone softening instinctively. "Hello, what's up?" Victoria probably didn't even realize how her voice had changed. On the other end, Ethan's playful voice came through. "Vicky, I'm starving here. When are you coming back? If I waste away from hunger, I'm blaming you." Victoria chuckled indulgently. "Didn't you eat a ton of crawfish last night? How are you hungry already?" All right, I'm coming back now." I smirked coldly. Almost as if he could sense my presence, Ethan added, "Oh, and Vicky, bring Sincere along next time. Yesterday was your wedding anniversary, and I stole your star and even made you buy me a late-night snack. I owe him a nice dinner to make up for it." Victoria's eyes flickered with guilt as she took a step back, still clutching her phone. I laughed bitterly, saying nothing as I turned to leave. Victoria hastily wrapped up her call, catching up to me in just a few strides. She offered to drive me to work, rambling about how the star research involved Ethan too and how she couldn't make decisions alone. It's his birthday soon, and he said he wanted a star. I just went along with it, she explained. I said nothing. The late-night gathering wasn't just the two of us, there were others too. Don't overthink it, all right? I looked at her calmly. This research project on the planet, it had taken her 3 years on and off. Ethan had only been here for 3 months. Did she not realize how ridiculous her reasoning sounded? Victoria might not have been aware, but every time she lied or felt nervous, she'd unconsciously tug at her clothes. When we reached the entrance to the apartment complex, Ethan called Victoria over again, for work or whatever reason. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. It had happened so many times by now. This summer, the rain was unusually frequent. After work one evening, I got caught in a downpour. That night, I suddenly came down with a high fever. Groggy and overheated, I watched as Victoria got out of bed to change her clothes. She noticed my gaze and explained, "Ethan's cat is sick. He's just a guy. He doesn't know how to take care of it. I'm going to check on him." I stared at her blankly. Just as she was about to leave the room, I called out to her. I had intended to ask her to bring me some cold medicine, but when the words came out, they changed. "Victoria, I have a fever. Could you take me to the hospital?" She paused at the door, looking troubled. She glanced down at her phone, which wouldn't stop vibrating. Finally, she walked into the living room and brought me the first aid kit. "You seem okay for now. Take some fever medicine and try to manage. It's urgent at Ethan's place. I'll take you to the hospital when I get back." With that, she hurried out the door, not even noticing how I was sweating under the blanket in the 64-degree Fahrenheit air-conditioned room. It wasn't like those summer days in college, when I'd sprint into the air-conditioned library after gym class, drenched in sweat. Back then, she'd follow me in, her face expressionless, pull tissues from her bag to wipe my sweat, and scold me, "Do you think you're invincible? It's so hot outside, and you're rushing into a cold room all sweaty. If you get sick, who's going to take care of you?" I blinked away the stinging in my eyes and let out a bitter laugh. Haven't I always known who's more important to her? Why am I still trying to fool myself? My actions just now only made me look like a fool. By the early morning, I was feeling unbearably sick. I called for an ambulance. After getting a shot at the hospital, I finally felt alive again. The doctor, noticing I hadn't had a checkup in ages, recommended a full health screening. In the end, I just had some blood drawn and went for a basic examination. It was almost time for work, so I couldn't wait for the results. I added the doctor on WhatsApp, agreeing to discuss when the reports came in. When I arrived at work, the dizziness hadn't subsided. Jason noticed immediately. "Fever? Let me take you to the hospital," he said. He threw a stack of new company documents on my desk and was about to drag me out the door. I pulled him back and patted his hand. My voice was hoarse as I said, "I just came back from the hospital. It's nothing serious." After confirming I was really fine, Jason pointed to the documents and said, "Make sure you study up. If you screw this up, I'll kick you out of the company." With the intensity of exam prep, I buried myself in the materials until evening. Before leaving the office, I checked my email and saw that the lawyer had sent over the finalized divorce agreement. Holding the papers, I drove through the storm to Victoria's research lab. In the underground parking lot, my phone buzzed with a Twitter notification. Ethan had posted a video of himself and Victoria. In the video, they were at a recent anime convention. Ethan had won a game and, overwhelmed with excitement, pulled Victoria into a kiss in front of the crowd. The caption read, "From the moment I met you, I thought, even if it's not public, I want to have you. And now, that dream has come true." Victoria and I had been together for 12 years, spanning our entire youth. Yet despite everything, the woman in the video felt like a stranger. It was as if I'd never truly known her. A guttural sob suddenly echoed from not far away. "Vicky, please, don't leave me. Is it so wrong that I love you? I've loved you since school." Following the sound, I saw a man cornering a woman against a car. His eyes were red as he questioned her, his voice desperate. Then in despair, he lowered his head and kissed Victoria. I watched as her hands, which had been hanging limply at her sides, encircled his waist the moment his lips met hers. There, in the stormy night, they shared a long, lingering kiss. A flash of lightning lit up the parking lot with a loud crack. "Who's there?" Victoria's voice trembled as she turned to see me. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Sincere. "What are you doing here?" Step by step, I walked toward them. Ethan stammered, "Vicky, Shay, it's not what you think. It's all my fault." Before he could finish, I punched him square in the face, sending him sprawling to the ground. I followed up with 2 swift kicks. Then, I took off my wedding ring and threw it at Victoria. Victoria seemed to snap out of her daze. Ignoring Ethan, she stammered, "Sincere, let me explain, it's not what you think." I cut her off, shoving the divorce papers at her. "Victoria, we're done." She chased after me, desperation in her voice. "Sincere, listen to me, it's not what it looks like with him." I didn't respond, striding quickly to my car. Just as I was about to close the door, she blocked it, her eyes pleading. "Sincere, I only saw him as a kid. We were just fooling around." I let out a cold laugh. "He's only 3 years younger than us. What, is he a man-child?" Victoria's eyes darted away, filled with unease. A strong premonition gripped her heart, telling her that if she let me leave today, it would truly be the end for us. "Don't do this, Sincere," she pleaded. "We've been together for so many years. You can't abandon me. I can't live without you." Her voice wavered, guilt seeping in. "Ethan was just a passing phase," she added, but her tone betrayed her uncertainty. Suddenly, a desperate scream erupted from behind us.
"Vicky, I've loved you for 10 years.
Ethan's voice cracked, raw with emotion. "If you don't want me, then I don't want to live anymore." He clutched a shard of glass to his neck. "Victoria, look at me, just look at me," he cried. "If you don't turn around, I'll do it." Victoria instinctively loosened her grip on me and turned back. I sneered. "Go to him then," I said coldly, slamming the door shut and starting my car without hesitation. In the rearview mirror, I saw Victoria clutching Ethan in her arms, but her eyes lingered in the direction of my departing car. I rolled down the window, and within moments my face was drenched. Whether from tears or the rain, I couldn't tell. When I got home, I began packing my things. Initially, I had planned to give Victoria a proper goodbye, but at that moment, I felt like the past 12 years I had spent with her were just a colossal mistake. Wasting over a decade of my youth on her felt like the ultimate joke. My only desire was to leave this place as quickly as possible. From the back of the closet, I pulled out a suitcase I hadn't touched in years, the same one Victoria had bought me as a wedding gift. When I received it, I had laughed in disbelief. "Victoria, you're so strange. Who gives a suitcase as a wedding gift?" Feigning nonchalance, she leaned into my ear with a playful smirk. "Well, do you like it?" "I do," I replied, my smile softening. When I turned to look at her, my lips brushed her cheek. Victoria froze, her breathing shallow. Gazing into my eyes, she lost her composure, her heartbeat quickening. Unable to resist, she kissed me. I wrapped my arms around her neck, lowering my head to meet her lips. When the kiss finally ended, we held each other, breathless. Nestling against my neck, her voice was hoarse as she murmured, "There's something you'll like even more." "What is it?" I asked, looking at her curiously. Victoria smiled, kissed my cheek, and pulled me down to the suitcase. "Enter the password to open it," she said. "It's your birthday." I opened the suitcase, and what I saw stunned me. Inside were 23 meticulously wrapped gifts, neatly arranged. Victoria explained that because her work often kept her so busy that she'd missed many of my birthdays, she had prepared all the gifts I should have received in my lifetime, from birth to the present. "Sincere," she said, "I'll never forget another one of your birthdays." I was overwhelmed, holding her tightly, unwilling to let go. Even now, many years later, I can still vividly recall how happy and touched I was at that moment. Unfortunately, time changes everything. What once was is no more. Wiping away my tears, I mechanically stuffed my belongings into the suitcase. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with a call from a mutual friend. Bitterly, I thought, Victoria truly is a master of time management. She can comfort her little lover while enlisting a friend to pacify me. When it became clear that I was determined to go through with the divorce, our friend could only sigh. "Sincere, I just hope you won't regret this decision someday." I finished packing and was about to leave when I heard the sound of the door opening. Looking up, I saw Victoria standing there, drenched from head to toe. "Sincere, don't go, please, let me explain," she begged. Just as I was about to reject her, my phone lit up beside the suitcase. That single moment made me freeze. Victoria leaned in to hug me, but stopped when she noticed my gaze. Following my line of sight, she bent down to pick up the phone, but I moved faster, slipping it into my pocket. Her eyes red, she asked, "Sincere, what's wrong?" My mind had gone blank. "Nothing," I replied. The message on my phone was from the doctor. I had glanced at it just in time to read, "It's a tumor." I'd always been in poor health and disliked checkups, so I hadn't considered the possibility of a tumor. Victoria had often fasted and prayed devoutly for my well-being, but my health never improved much. Eventually, she stopped bringing it up. And now, I clenched my fists, a whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. The timing couldn't have been worse. I didn't want Victoria to know about my illness, not yet. My plans to leave were disrupted, so I mumbled a few vague words to placate her before lying down on the bed. Seeing this, Victoria tucked me in and headed to the bathroom. Only then did I pick up my phone to text the doctor for more information. "Doctor, my health has always been poor. Is it benign or malignant?" The doctor couldn't give a definitive answer, urging me to come in for further tests. "We need the results to be certain," they said. That response left me even more uneasy. Despite everything with Victoria, I still wanted to live. I had spent so many years trying to take care of myself. Before long, the bathroom door opened, and Victoria walked out, wrapped in a towel. She climbed into bed, causing the mattress to dip slightly. Curling up beside me, she whispered, "Honey, it's been so long since we've been together." She leaned close to my ear, her warm breath brushing against my earlobe, sending a shiver down my spine. Instinctively, I clutched my chest, struggling to catch my breath. I didn't want to confront the truth, so I forced myself to sound cold. "Victoria, let go of me, or else you can sleep in the guest room tonight." Victoria, knowing she was in the wrong today, didn't dare provoke me further. She released her hold and stepped aside. Only then did my taut nerves begin to relax. My mind was a chaotic mess, but for the sake of my health, I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, when I woke up, Victoria was already gone. After taking the day off from work, I went to the hospital alone. As the doctor reviewed my test results, his expression grew increasingly grim. My heart sank in response. When he delivered the final diagnosis, I felt like I had hit rock bottom. "It's not looking good," he said. "To minimize the risks, you should undergo surgery as soon as possible." I walked out of the consultation room like a shell of a person, consumed by guilt and regret. But it was too late to change anything. If this was my reality, I had to face it head on. Life had to go on, and I didn't want anything to hold me back. I scheduled the surgery for Friday morning and went home to rest, knowing there was a difficult conversation waiting for me that evening. Since I had to undergo surgery, I decided it was time to tell Victoria the truth. I knew she wouldn't take the news of my illness and upcoming operation lightly. I needed to conserve my energy, but as the clock neared midnight, Victoria still hadn't come home or left me any messages. I wasn't sure how I felt. Hurt? Not really. Perhaps just numb. I dialed her number and she picked up immediately. But before I could say anything, Ethan's voice came through the line. "Sir, Vicky's asleep. If it's not urgent, can you call back tomorrow?" And with that, he hung up. I wasn't angry. I decided to call her again in the morning instead. There was still time. The next day, I was already at the hospital, but Victoria's phone remained unreachable. Just as I was about to call Jason, Victoria finally called me. "Sincere, I'm so sorry. My phone ran out of battery and I just turned it on. Last night, our team made a breakthrough, and we were so excited that we celebrated with drinks. I completely forgot to update you." Victoria's explanation came quickly, as if she was afraid I'd misunderstand. But I wasn't particularly interested. I cut straight to the point. "Do you have time to come to the hospital?" Her tone became anxious. "Sincere, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" "It's nothing major, just..." Before I could finish, Ethan's startled exclamation interrupted me on the other end of the line. "Eth, are you okay?" Victoria asked in a panic, abandoning the phone to check on him. I chuckled bitterly, then hung up and walked into the operating room alone. That evening, after work, Victoria came home earlier than usual. Realizing I wasn't there, she found out I had been hospitalized. When she saw me lying pale on the hospital bed, her eyes reflected a brief flash of guilt. "Sincere, I'm so sorry about this morning," she began. "It's fine," I interrupted, not wanting to hear her excuses. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the pile of medication on the table. Sitting by my bedside, she asked with concern, "Was the surgery successful? How are you feeling? Should we transfer you to a better hospital?" Feeling weak and drained, I didn't have the energy to argue. I slowly turned to face the other side, signaling my need for rest. "Sincere, please don't be upset. Once you're feeling better, I'll take you on that road trip you've always wanted. How about that?" After 7 years of marriage, this was the first time Victoria had ever mentioned going on a trip with me. In the past, whenever I suggested traveling to unwind, she always had an excuse to decline. Even our honeymoon was canceled because of her work commitments. As for the road trip, I had already gone on it by myself long ago. But I didn't tell her, this time even though she brought up the idea on her own. I knew deep down that she'd find an excuse to back out before we could leave. This trip was destined to remain nothing more than words. "Sure," I replied absent-mindedly. Victoria was delighted by my agreement. To her, my response was a sign that we were on the verge of reconciling. "I knew it. You still love me, Sincere. I'll never let you down again." "Oh, really? You'll never let me down again?" Without expectations, there's no room for disappointment. Thinking about it seriously, I couldn't blame Victoria for being drawn to Ethan. Her life had been monotonous and uneventful. From a small town, she worked her way up to a prestigious position at the Astrophysics Institute. On paper, she had a promising future and a steady 12-year relationship. Many envied her seemingly perfect life, but to her it was as dull as plain water. Ethan was the spark in her otherwise mundane existence. Handsome and flamboyant, he was full of fiery passion. She couldn't help but be drawn to him. With him, she experienced things she never had before, attending anime conventions, racing through the night, watching the sunrise atop snow-capped mountains. Together, they did everything most couples would dream of. By Saturday, as my condition improved, Victoria called her boss to request time off. She began sticking to me like glue, as if afraid I'd change my mind. She spent every moment trying to please me, diligently planning the road trip she had promised. The plane tickets and the itinerary for each day after arrival seemed to reflect a genuine anticipation for this honeymoon trip that had been postponed for 7 years. Perhaps it was fate. Victoria and I had booked our tickets to Paris on the same day. While she planned everything meticulously, I was sitting idly by, playing a game on my phone. Just then, a notification popped up on Twitter. Seeing Ethan's name, I knew it was time for his daily self-torture session. Ever since Victoria went on leave, Ethan had been posting about his feelings for her every day. Whether to torment himself or to disgust me, I couldn't tell. Today it seemed he had reached his breaking point. He posted a cryptic tweet, "She will be mine." I smirked as I typed my own tweet, "My wife has agreed to leave everything behind and travel the world with me. Life is short, only 30,000 days. Make the most of them. The past is the past. From now on, we'll live well together." By the afternoon, Ethan couldn't hold back anymore and asked to meet me. We met at a cafe where I saw him with red-rimmed eyes, looking utterly haggard. His voice trembled as he asked, "Do you love her that much? Even after everything between us, you won't give her up?" I waved him off nonchalantly and replied, "She said she loves me. She said she couldn't live without me." Ethan's face crumpled, his desperation palpable. "You're leaving? Why? Why didn't she tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. I pulled up a screenshot of Victoria's plane ticket and showed it to him. "We've been together for 12 years. She cried and begged me to forgive her. I told her that if she quit her job and left with me, I'd forgive her. She didn't hesitate for even a second before agreeing," I said, raising an eyebrow with a smirk that didn't reach my eyes. Ethan looked as though he was losing his mind. He grabbed his hair with both hands, biting his lip hard, and let out a guttural cry of despair. "No, this can't be. She told me she loved me." I stared at him coldly, unmoved. Ethan truly had a knack for emotional warfare. On our 7th anniversary, he deliberately made headlines with Victoria, forcing me to confront their relationship. He orchestrated scenarios where I'd see them together, hoping to make Victoria leave me for him. But to his dismay, Victoria's commitment to me was the flaw in his otherwise meticulous plan. His schemes ultimately amounted to nothing. Enraged, Ethan lunged at me, but I landed a punch that sent him sprawling to the ground. Without hesitation, I kicked him repeatedly until my body protested. Finally, I crouched down, grabbed him by the collar, and sneered, "Listen, kid, if you're going to be the other man, at least know your place. She risked her life to save me. Did you really think," I paused for effect, "that you could take her from me?" His handsome face twisted with resentment, and I decided to twist the knife further. "If Victoria boards that plane with me tomorrow, I'll forgive her, and we'll start over. But if she doesn't..." I trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Ethan's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. He understood. At the apartment complex, Victoria was pacing anxiously, checking her phone repeatedly. When she spotted me, guilt and unease clouded her expression. "Sincere," she began. "This time it's different. Ethan is threatening to jump from the Research Institute roof. This trip to the Northwest, can we postpone it?" Ethan really knew how to manipulate her. I didn't respond immediately, merely gazing at her, taking in every detail of the woman I had loved for 12 years. I etched her image into my mind, over and over. Just as her patience was about to run out, I broke the silence. "I already figured out why you didn't have dinner with me on my birthday," I said. Her face froze, panic flickering across her features. She opened her mouth to explain but faltered. After a long pause, she finally said, "There was an author Ethan really liked at that anime convention. It was his last chance to meet them. It was supposed to be a graduation gift. I couldn't say no." I let out a bitter laugh. "That author was my favorite too." Victoria blinked, stunned. She instinctively started to say, "Next time I'll," but her words died mid-sentence. I locked eyes with her and said firmly, "There won't be a next time." We stared at each other for several minutes. Then I lowered my gaze and waved her off. "Ethan's threatening to jump. As the team leader, you should handle it." Victoria hesitated, then pleaded, "What about the Northwest trip?" I smiled faintly. "We'll see if there's another chance." Relief washed over her face, as if she had been granted a reprieve. She rushed off into the storm to hail a cab back to the observatory. Before heading to the airport, I printed out my medical reports and left them on her nightstand. Then, I hailed my own cab. At the airport, I scrolled through my phone out of boredom. I had already deleted all the photos of Victoria from my gallery, but wanted to ensure I hadn't missed any. As I scrolled back to the earliest dates, I found one. It was a candid shot taken by Jason on the day I proposed. In the photo, Victoria wore a white cocktail dress, and I was on one knee, holding out a ring. She had her hands over her mouth, eyes wide with surprise. Back then, we truly loved each other. But times change, and the past is gone. Lovers turned strangers. After deleting the photos, I closed my eyes to rest. An hour later, I boarded a flight bound for Paris. Before takeoff, I sent a compressed file to both sets of parents and our mutual friends. At 10 a.m. Paris time, my plane landed. Among the crowd, I spotted someone holding a sign with my name on it. Waving, I walked toward her. She said, "Sir, welcome. I'm your new assistant, Sarah." As Sarah took my luggage, she introduced herself. I nodded in acknowledgement. She handed me a new phone with a SIM card inside. "Jay specifically instructed me to give this to you," she said. "He also asked me to let you know that if you decide to use this new number, you won't need to worry about things back home. He'll take care of it. As one of the company's key owners, I have numerous high-profile clients to maintain relationships with, so I avoid changing my number unless absolutely necessary." Holding the new phone, I felt a wave of emotion. I said, "I understand, thank you." Sarah looked at her new boss, who seemed to have tears welling up in his eyes and couldn't quite wrap her head around it. It was just a phone. Was it really worth crying over? You're welcome, sir. The car is waiting outside. Please follow me, she said. Following my assistant, I found myself zoning out. Sarah assumed her new boss was feeling homesick because of the phone incident, so she cautiously tried to comfort me. Sir, the branch office is still in its early stages. Once it's up and running in a couple of months, you'll be able to work remotely from home. Hearing this, my gaze darkened slightly. I smiled but didn't respond. Sarah, sensing my mood, wisely chose to keep silent and led the way. In the car, I sat in the back, resting my eyes. From the front passenger seat, Sarah turned around and spoke softly. Sir, Jay has arranged a welcome dinner for you. Would you prefer to rest at your villa to adjust to the time difference first or head directly to the dinner? I opened my eyes to look at her. She added, Jay has arranged for your villa to be in a neighborhood close to the company. The welcome dinner is in the southern part of the city, so the two places are in opposite directions. All the company employees are really looking forward to it. As I watched her lips move, I suddenly felt a ringing in my ears. I didn't catch everything she said, but from her expression, I could tell she really hoped I would attend the dinner. Since my surgery, I haven't had a proper rest. Although the surgery was a success, my body remains weak. The 10-hour journey to oversee the new branch had pushed me to my limits. Still, I couldn't bear to disappoint others, nor could I reject Jay's kind gesture. Let's go to the dinner, I said. Got it. Sarah straightened up and instructed the driver in French to turn around and head to the dinner. The car merged onto the highway, and the silence was interrupted by the buzz of my phone. I checked and saw a message from Victoria. Sincere, please don't be mad. Ethan hasn't been doing well lately. I'm worried he might do something drastic, so I have to stay and look after him tonight. Once he's in a better state, I'll come back to you. Honey, I love you. When I'm back, let's take that road trip we planned. Wait for me. Reading her message, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Victoria truly is something else. She's so considerate of her lover that she avoids calling her legal husband, fearing the sound of their conversation might upset her paramour. Even so, she has the audacity to say she loves me. Ridiculous. I silenced my phone and put it back in my bag, gazing out at the rapidly passing scenery. A wave of dizziness hit me, and I found myself collapsing forward. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital. Sir, you're awake. You scared me. Sarah sat beside me, looking exhausted as she watched the IV drip. I was taken aback, glancing at the dark sky outside. You've been here taking care of me this whole time? I asked. My own hoarse voice startled me. Yes, she replied. Jay instructed me to make sure you're taken care of. Sarah stood up, adjusted the angle of my bed, and poured me a glass of water. I felt a mix of guilt and awkwardness, stiffly murmuring a thank you. Sensing my discomfort, Sarah tried to lighten the mood. Sir, you don't need to thank me. I'm Jay's distant cousin, and he's looked after me for years. When he gives me a task, I make sure to see it through. If you really feel bad, you could start by reimbursing me for the parking fine I got on the emergency lane. I was speechless. Half asleep, I received another message from Victoria. Sincere, are you asleep? Why haven't you replied? I miss you so much. Groggily, I glanced at the message, and a wave of goosebumps spread over me. Noticing my reaction, Sarah leaned over curiously. Is that from your wife? It must be around 2 a.m. in New York right now. She's still texting you. She must really love you. Sir, you're so lucky. Love? Lucky? A hint of self-mockery appeared in my eyes. If I told Sarah that Victoria sent these messages while lying in another man's bed, would she still think I was lucky? If Victoria hadn't spent the night elsewhere, she would have seen what I left for her. Sir, why aren't you saying anything? Did I hit the nail on the head? Sarah asked, her excitement evident. Her chatter was giving me a headache. Half jokingly, I said, Sarah, if you're that envious, I could ask Jay to help you find a boyfriend. Please don't. Sarah instantly went silent, retreating to the corner to play on her phone. I couldn't help but chuckle. There was still one IV bottle left. Once it finished, I'd be discharged. Lying on the hospital bed, my body felt exhausted, yet sleep evaded me. My mind kept wandering. Had Victoria not seen the compressed file? How could she send me such suggestive texts so calmly? The more I thought about it, the more agitated I became. Frustrated, I grabbed my phone and sent the file to Victoria again. I clutched my phone, waiting for a reply, but no new messages came through. Irritated, I tossed the phone aside and tried to rest my eyes. Just as I was about to drift off, my phone started ringing. Annoyed, I assumed Victoria was finally responding. But to my dismay, the caller ID showed it was my mom. I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Growing up, I feared nothing but my mother's tears. My father had passed away when I was young, and my mom had worked tirelessly to support me through school. Because of her, I matured early, becoming the model student everyone admired, a golden child in the eyes of others. But the high expectations and pressure I placed on myself eventually led to depression. After I started college, my mom remarried, and my symptoms worsened. Yet, I never told her about my struggles. I didn't want her to worry. The impulsiveness I'd felt while sending that file earlier had completely faded. Now, all I felt was regret. I contemplated ignoring the call, letting it ring out, but the persistent ringing showed no signs of stopping, leaving me no choice. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Mom." "Sincere," she said, her voice trembling. "You finally picked up." Hearing her voice, I could tell she was crying. "Mom, don't cry. I'm fine, really. If you cry, it'll only make me worry." She sniffled and quickly replied, "I'm not crying, don't worry about me. Sincere, tell me, did that woman Victoria really do something to betray you? Is what you sent in that file true?" I wanted to reassure her, but there was no point denying it after what I'd already done. Taking a deep breath, I admitted, "Yes, Mom, I want a divorce." Victoria had always been the perfect daughter-in-law in my mother's eyes. She adored her, treating her like her own daughter, sometimes even better than she treated me. To discover that someone the family had embraced so wholeheartedly could do something so despicable, it was a hard pill to swallow. My mom knew how much I loved Victoria, so hearing me calmly say I wanted a divorce broke her heart. "Sincere," she said, her voice steady despite her emotions. "Whatever decision you make, I'll support you. All I want is for you to be happy, truly happy. Remember, your mom and Uncle G will always have your back." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Taking a deep breath, I fought to keep my emotions in check. "I know, Mom." "Thank you." With my family's understanding and support, a warmth spread through my chest, dispelling some of the darkness that had been weighing me down. The next morning, Victoria woke up to find herself lying beside someone. She instinctively reached out to wrap her arm around the person's waist, but something felt off. This wasn't Sincere's body. Alarmed, she bolted upright. Yesterday had been a whirlwind. She had rushed to the research institute to coax Ethan down from the rooftop. As she was preparing to head home to Sincere, Ethan had wrapped his arms around her from behind, tears streaming down his face. "Don't go tonight, Vicky. Please, I'm begging you. Just for tonight," he pleaded. "I've loved you for so long. Just stay with me, just for one night, okay?" Victoria hesitated, torn between two voices in her mind. One urged her to return home. Sincere was waiting to go on a trip with her. But the other voice argued, "Stay. Sincere sent you here. If he gets mad, just apologize a few times. Cry a little, he'll forgive you." Ethan's tears burned like fire, and she couldn't bring herself to leave. Now, looking at Ethan sleeping peacefully beside her, a pang of guilt and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. She suddenly recalled the bittersweet, resolute look Sincere had given her when they parted ways at the neighborhood gate yesterday. It was as if he decided never to see her again. Panicking, she scrambled to find her phone. It was dead. After sending Sincere a few texts last night, it had powered off. She vaguely remembered receiving another message, but her attention had been entirely consumed by the two men in her life. Fumbling with the charger, it took her several tries before the phone finally powered on. The 2 minutes it took to boot up felt like an eternity. The moment the phone came to life, Victoria immediately called Sincere. The call connected, but no one answered. It rang until it disconnected automatically. Her heart sank, her palms growing clammy as unease gripped her. Desperately, she hit redial. This time, the call was declined almost instantly. Her heart plummeted. Just as despair began to set in, another call came through. Without even checking the caller ID, she answered, blurting out, "Honey!" But instead of the voice she longed to hear, she was met with an angry tirade. Stunned, Victoria froze, utterly bewildered. After a moment, Victoria finally realized what had happened. Sincere had taken footage of her with Ethan, edited it into a video, and sent it to their relatives and friends. At the end of the video, Sincere had added a personal message in his characteristic style. "This video is a wedding gift for Ms. Victoria and Mr. Ethan, wishing the two of you a lifetime of happiness." She hung up the phone and opened Sincere's chat window. There was only one message waiting for her. "The divorce papers are on the dining table. Sign them and leave my house. Thanks." Victoria broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her cries woke Ethan, who groggily sat up, his voice raspy from the aftermath of their night together. He wrapped an arm around Victoria's shoulders and asked, "Vicky, what's wrong?" Victoria didn't care about Ethan holding her. Trembling, she dialed Sincere's number. When the call connected, her heart briefly filled with relief. Sincere hadn't blocked her. Did that mean there was still hope? Ethan interrupted her. "Vicky, don't call him. Look at me instead." He pulled Victoria into his arms and kissed her neck. "That guy is old and boring. You two have been together for 12 years, and you've told me you've been sick of him for ages. Can't we just be happy together?" As he leaned in to kiss her lips, Victoria's fury erupted. She slapped Ethan across the face and shouted, "It's all your fault. You seduced me, and now Sincere won't even answer my calls." Ethan was stunned, his hand instinctively touching his reddened cheek. He looked at Victoria with a wounded expression as she hastily got dressed. He couldn't understand it. He'd been at her side for so long, always obedient to her, even more so than she was to her husband. Yet now, just because Sincere wasn't answering her calls, she was this furious. Why? When Victoria was about to leave, Ethan ran after her, shirtless. "Vicky, Victoria, I won't let you go." He shouted her name over and over, his voice raw with desperation. But Victoria didn't look back, walking away briskly and slamming the door behind her. She got into her car, slamming the door shut, and sped off toward home. It was a particularly rainy summer. Several times she nearly lost control of the car and almost caused accidents. One driver, narrowly avoiding a collision, rolled down his window despite the downpour and yelled at her angrily. But Victoria seemed oblivious, as if in a trance. One thought consumed her: "I must get home. I must find Sincere. Sincere loves me. He'll forgive me. And if he doesn't, I'll kneel and beg him. He won't be able to stay mad at me. It's not too late. It's not too late." But when Victoria arrived home, the house was empty. It felt as if half of it had been hollowed out. All of Sincere's belongings were gone. She suddenly remembered a conversation they'd had while packing for a trip. She had teased him, "We're just going on vacation, not moving away forever. Why are you packing so much?" Sincere had said nothing at the time, only giving her a calm look. Now, her heart clenched as if pierced by needles. No, this can't be. He's just angry. He's just hiding, waiting for me to come and coax him. He'll forgive me. He'll forgive me. Victoria frantically searched the house for any trace of Sincere's belongings. She told herself that as long as she found something of his, it would mean he planned to return. The house was just empty because he didn't like the decorations anymore. 7 years it was normal for him to want to change. When he came back, she'd take time off work and go shopping with him to pick out new things. Anything he liked, she'd buy for him. "Just come back, please, Sincere, come back." But after hours of searching, she found nothing. Sincere had meticulously removed every trace of himself from the house. Victoria's fragile composure was unraveling. She choked out, "Sincere, you can't be this cruel." Clinging to a sliver of hope, she walked into their bedroom. From a distance, she saw a piece of paper on the nightstand. Her heart jumped, and she rushed over. But when she saw what it was, she collapsed in despair. It was a medical report. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out, "Sincere, how could you go through such a major surgery without telling me? It's my fault. I didn't take care of you." Victoria sank to her knees, her tears falling onto the paper. She tried calling Sincere again, but he still wouldn't answer. Desperate, she decided to go to his company. Parking her car recklessly in front of the building, she jumped out and ran toward the entrance. The moment she stepped inside, the security guard stopped her. His tone was formal and unyielding. "Miss, the boss instructed us not to let irrelevant individuals into the building." Victoria's heart bled at the guard's words. She assumed Sincere was inside and tried to force her way past him. But the guard was resolute, blocking her path no matter how hard she pushed. Their commotion attracted the attention of employees working late and passers-by outside. The guard, clearly annoyed, said, "Miss, no matter what, I'm not letting you upstairs today. If you still care about Mr. Sincere and don't want to embarrass him, you'd stop causing a scene like this." His stern words finally brought Victoria back to her senses. Following his gaze, she looked around and saw the crowd that had gathered. Her heart sank into the abyss. Most of the employees in the company knew she was Sincere's wife. She couldn't afford to throw tantrums and add to his burdens or embarrass him anymore. If she disgraced him to the point where he truly decided to leave her, she wouldn't even know where to cry. After apologizing earnestly to the security guard, Victoria got into her car and went to find their mutual friends, but none of them gave her a warm reception. Left with no choice, she kept calling Jason. On the 10th attempt, Jason finally answered. Through him, she learned that Sincere had shown signs of depression relapsing recently. He had even collapsed from physical weakness due to a surgery and was hospitalized. Victoria refused to believe it, unwilling to accept it. After days of painstaking inquiries, she finally discovered that Sincere had gone to Paris and wouldn't be returning for 2 or 3 years. Victoria stood frozen in place, her mind suddenly blank, as if struck by lightning. Then she laughed at herself bitterly. The man she used to be able to find any time and anywhere now required endless searching just to track down. Opening their chat window, she suddenly realized that Sincere had been drifting further and further away from her for a long time. He had stopped sharing his daily life with her ages ago, but back then, she had been too preoccupied with Ethan to notice. Now any messages she sent him were met with nothing but a red exclamation mark. Opening his old social media posts, she saw that all their shared memories of their relationship had been deleted. The only thing left was a reposted post that read, "When do you completely give up on someone? After countless lies and betrayals, I hope I can live happily from now on." Victoria obsessively refreshed the page, as if her persistence could somehow bring back the posts he had deleted. Memories began flooding back 3 years ago, when Sincere had also gone to Paris for a job. But back then, when she fell ill, he had returned without hesitation, just to take care of her. She remembered how his eyes had instantly turned red when he saw how weak she was in her hospital bed. It had taken all her effort to comfort him and cheer him up. Jason had been so upset and annoyed by Sincere's sudden return that he had scolded him, saying, "You're such a hopeless simp." How had Sincere replied back then? Victoria suddenly recalled it. His eyes had been filled with nothing but her, as he retorted with a touch of defiance, "My Victoria is sick. Of course, I have to be by her side. If being a simp means being with her for eternity, so be it." Hearing those words, Victoria had laughed so hard her eyes turned into crescent moons. Jason, overwhelmed by the cringe of it all, had bolted out of the hospital room without a second's delay, staring at Sincere's now empty social media page. Victoria found herself reminiscing about all the beautiful moments they had shared. Their first meeting and his love at first sight, his unwavering devotion after getting to know her, her own uncontrollable longing when his condition improved, the pure joy and happiness she felt when they were together. She remembered the nervous tears she had shed when he proposed, the unstoppable flood of emotions that made her feel like she had the world in her hands. She remembered their wedding, the tears of bittersweet joy as she vowed to have him forever, and their cozy, blissful life together as a married couple. But now she had lost him, the boy who once had eyes only for her. She had lost the happiness and love she had fought so hard to win. When had it all started to slip away? How had the love and happiness vanished? 7 years ago, the Victoria of that time would never have forgiven the Victoria of today. She deserved to die 1,000 deaths for what she had done. It felt as though a bullet had been fired straight into her heart, leaving it riddled with holes, bleeding profusely. Victoria understood why Sincere had left her so decisively, but she simply couldn't accept it. Just a few days ago, she had thought she could win his forgiveness with her tears and pleas. She believed that if she humbled herself enough, Sincere would ultimately relent, but she had forgotten how stubborn Sincere could be. He had been through enough to know that once he made up his mind about something, there was no changing it. In their marriage, his constant compromises and concessions had made her forget his true nature. By the time she realized her mistakes and wanted to make amends, Sincere had already decided not to give her another chance. He had taken back the love he once gave her. His heart was completely closed off now. He had given up on her. Victoria was panicked, scared, and full of regret. Only after learning that Sincere had left the country did she finally understand her own heart. She realized that Ethan had only been a brief thrill in an otherwise steady and happy marriage. All along, the only person she had truly loved was Sincere. Ethan had used threats of self-harm and tears to keep her by his side. Torn by her guilt, she had wanted to leave, but her sense of morality held her back. In the end, she had convinced herself it was Sincere's fault for driving her away. Just this once, she had told herself. I'll indulge this one time, and then I'll go back to him. Sincere will never know. But in doing so, she had destroyed every chance they had. Now, with no one to stop her, she and Ethan could be together freely, but all she felt was regret. Regret so deep it twisted her insides, making her wish she could kill herself. Meanwhile, after being discharged from the hospital, Sincere had thrown himself into his work. Within just 2 days, he had won over the Paris team, earning their genuine admiration for their new leader. When Sarah expressed surprise at his capabilities, he didn't even look up from the contract he was reviewing. He simply said in a calm, understated tone, "It's only natural." Sarah had always respected capable people the most. Otherwise, Jason wouldn't have been so obedient to me. At that moment, her admiration for me reached its peak, as if she was one step away from having "I'm Sincere's #1 fan" written across her face. As for this trip to Paris, I was satisfied with everything except one thing. I just couldn't understand why Jason insisted on arranging for Sarah to move into my house. Originally, the villa near the company was something Jason rented for himself. Then one day, Sarah gave me a heads up that she was moving in. I thought she was joking, but who knew that on the same afternoon she texted me. She actually showed up with bags upon bags, calling it a temporary solution while short on funds in a foreign land. When I offered to help her financially, Sarah replied with a firm, "I can't accept charity." I was speechless. Was Jason doing this because he knew he had divorced Victoria and wanted to spite her by putting another woman in my house? It was so childish that I couldn't help but laugh. The first weekend in Paris, Jason visited to check on work. I teased him as I lounged on the sofa. "Jay, you're quite the workaholic, aren't you? Not even leaving your employees some rest on the weekend." Jason shot me a glare and said bluntly, "Don't think I can't tell you're accusing me of exploiting my employees." Caught in the act, I hugged a pillow and burst out laughing. He pushed on, "Don't change the subject. I need to ask you, are you really divorcing Victoria? Have you made up your mind?" Not wanting to discuss her, I picked up the glass of milk on the table to change the topic. "Next time you visit Paris, bring me a carton of that milk from back home. I swear it tastes purer than the stuff here." Jason's eyes widened as he barked, "Sincere, stop changing the subject. Answer me." Finally, I straightened up and answered seriously, "Yes, I've made up my mind. It's really over." "And Victoria? She's still not agreeing, is she? Otherwise, she wouldn't keep calling and harassing me," Jason probed. "She's been calling you?" I frowned slightly. "Of course," Jason said with a raised eyebrow. "I haven't blocked her on purpose, let her feel a sliver of hope, only to be crushed by despair." I gave him a thumbs up, marveling. Classic Jason. Jason smoothed his hair with a smug grin. Her little boyfriend must have been dumped by her. A couple of days ago, he caused a scene at the company entrance. I had security throw him out and warned him that if he came back, I'd report all their dirty laundry to his workplace. It worked. He hasn't shown up since. He added, "Honestly, Sincere, you're too soft. What's the point of just telling your mutual friends about their affair? You should have gone straight to their employer." I didn't respond, just kept listening. After all, I was holding back out of respect for the 12 years we'd been together. But if Victoria ever truly crossed the line, I wouldn't hesitate to report her to her workplace. That Sunday, Jason woke up early, ready to take me out for some serious shopping. But just as I slipped on my left shoe, my phone started ringing off the hook. "Sincere? It's Uncle G. Your mom just fainted and was rushed to the hospital. You'd better come back quickly." Uncle G, whose full name is George, is my mom's second husband. I've always called him that. Hearing this, I was so panicked I nearly dropped my phone. I barely got my shoes on before rushing out. Jason, thinking I was just in a hurry to leave, chased after me. "Sincere, wait up," he called. It wasn't until we were in the car heading to the airport that I calmed down enough to explain, "My mom's in the hospital." The atmosphere in the car grew heavy. My mom has always been healthy, so for her to suddenly collapse and be hospitalized, there had to be more to it. Replaying Uncle G's vague words in my head, I guessed that Victoria, unable to reach me, had gone to my mom to beg for forgiveness. "Jason," I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly and staring straight ahead, "call Victoria. I need to know where she is right now." Jason immediately understood. He fumbled for his phone, dialing her number from his recent calls. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. Victoria didn't pick up, which only fueled my suspicions. My lips pressed into a thin line, and my eyes burned with restrained anger. Jason, worried I might drive recklessly in my state, kept trying to soothe me. On the flight, I stayed tense the entire time. Only after landing, rushing to the hospital, and seeing my mom awake and in good spirits did I finally relax. Victoria, upon seeing me, froze in place, standing awkwardly in the corner of the hospital room, clutching the hem of her wrinkled clothes with reddened eyes. After comforting my mom, I shot Victoria a glance and walked out. She immediately followed me into a nearby stairwell. Pulling out a pack of cigarettes, I was about to light one when she grabbed my hand. Her voice was hoarse as she began but before she could finish, my icy gaze stopped her in her tracks. Her eyes flickered with hurt as she stiffly withdrew her hand. "Sincere, don't smoke. It's not good for you," she murmured. I let out a cold laugh and stuffed the cigarette back into my pocket. "Whether I smoke or not, what does it have to do with you? Victoria, was my mom hospitalized because of you?" She lowered her head, looking like a guilty child, too afraid to answer. For the first time, I took a proper look at her, a disheveled, pitiful figure in crumpled clothes. The dark circles under her eyes and her disheveled hair made it almost impossible for me to reconcile her current appearance with the meticulous, flawless, and elegant woman I remembered. But so what? She brought this upon herself. I said, "Victoria, let's take this chance to finalize our divorce. I'll contact you once I've set up an appointment." I didn't want to argue with her any longer. After throwing out those words, I turned to leave. Victoria, who had long been waiting to see me, couldn't bear to let me go so easily. "Don't leave, Sincere. Please don't leave me," she pleaded, blocking my path and dropping to her knees, clutching my leg. "Honey, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please. For the sake of the good times we once shared, forgive me this time, won't you?" I stood there motionlessly, feeling the dampness spreading across my pant leg. "Victoria, your tears are worthless," I said coldly. I neither pushed her away nor comforted her, my tone unusually indifferent. Her body trembled uncontrollably as she continued to beg. "Honey, I'm begging you, just one more chance. I swear I won't hurt you again. I'll take good care of you." She should have stopped there. The mention of taking care of me set me off like a cat with its fur bristling. I slapped her hard across the face and coldly spat out, "Victoria, you're a heartless wretch. You're not worthy. Don't call me honey, it disgusts me. Tomorrow, we're going to the courthouse to finalize the divorce. Otherwise, you'd better be ready for a lawsuit." Without looking back, I strode away. Her voice called out one last time before I left. "Sincere, I saw the diagnosis. It got worse because I didn't take you to the hospital in time, right?" Her voice quivered as she asked the question. In the past, I would have never let her feel so guilty or sad. I would have told her a kind lie to comfort her. But now I only turned my back on her and replied firmly, "Yes, it's all because of you. Every bit of suffering I've endured is your fault." As soon as I said this, Victoria collapsed to the ground, clutching herself as she sobbed uncontrollably. She no longer had the courage or strength to stop me. After returning to New York, I didn't go home but checked into a hotel instead. My mother was no longer in serious condition, so she didn't need me by her side. Once I'd made all the necessary arrangements, I returned to my room to rest. That night there was a heavy downpour. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, so I pulled out my portable notebook from my bag and started working. Around 1 a.m, the doorbell to my room rang. I put down my laptop, grabbed a glass vase from the side, and cautiously approached. Looking through the peephole, I saw no one, which made me even warier. "Who's there? If you don't speak up, I'm calling the police," I warned. A hotel staff member peeked their head around the corner, hurriedly waving their hands. "I'm so sorry to disturb you at this late hour, sir. We're in a bit of a bind. There's someone kneeling in the rain outside and it's causing a serious disturbance for the hotel. Could you please come down and take a look?" I relaxed my grip on the vase, puzzled. Someone's kneeling in the rain? Why not just call the police? Why involve me? Looking conflicted, the staff member explained, "We try to avoid unnecessary alarm that could disrupt other guests or scare off potential customers. This person said her name is Victoria and that she's your wife. She claimed it's a personal matter, so we thought." Hearing her name made my scalp tingle. I had sent Victoria a message earlier that evening to arrange our divorce appointment. This must have been why she was here causing trouble. Not wanting to make things harder for the staff, I reluctantly threw on a jacket and followed them downstairs. By the hotel entrance, a small crowd had gathered to watch the spectacle. Even at this late hour, New York's streets were never truly empty. I pushed through the onlookers and stepped into the rain. Victoria had been kneeling there for who knows how long. She was soaked to the bone, her face pale as if she might faint at any moment. When she saw me, her eyes lit up instantly. She shuffled on her knees toward me, hesitating to hug me, afraid I'd reject her. In the end, she clenched her fists tightly and looked up at me with utter despair. "Sincere, I knew it. I knew you'd come out to see me. You've forgiven me, haven't you?" I had no idea how she reached that conclusion. Standing under the black umbrella, I looked down at her and said, "Victoria, you." Before I could finish, her phone rang. At this hour, there were only a handful of people who might call her. I stopped speaking and glanced at the phone in her pocket, the screen lighting up intermittently. "Aren't you going to answer?" "Maybe it's something urgent," I said. "Who knows? Maybe another light bulb has gone out. Don't keep your lover waiting too long, or I won't be able to explain myself again. Sincere, don't say tat," she murmured, her eyes filled with hurt. Of course, she understood I was mocking her. After all, it was because she had gone to take care of Ethan's cat that my illness went untreated. If only I hadn't endured so much pain. Each time she thought of her past self, Victoria was consumed with hatred so intense she wanted to destroy everything. Under my cold gaze, Victoria trembled as she pulled out her phone. Unsurprisingly, the caller ID displayed Ethan's name. Watching my indifferent expression, Victoria's heart sank to rock bottom. She asked, "Sincere, do you really not care about me anymore?" I raised an unconcerned eyebrow and even spoke up on Ethan's behalf. "That kid is out there hustling all alone in New York. It's not easy for him. As his friend, as his boss, it's only right that you go check on him." My words were like daggers, piercing her already broken heart, leaving it in tatters. Victoria swayed as if about to collapse. She said, "Sincere, I'm begging you, don't say that. Don't treat me like this. I'll never choose anyone over you again. Please don't," I said, stepping back to avoid her. Then I smirked and added, "Wasn't it you who told me he's all alone? You should feel sorry for him." Leaning in slightly, I looked her in the eye and taunted, "Why don't you go and show him some compassion?" Our eyes met, and Victoria clearly saw the mockery in mine. A sharp, heart-wrenching pain surged through her chest. Her eyes brimmed with tears she could no longer hold back. Silent tears mixed with the rain as they slid down her face, her trembling shoulders the only sign of her heartbreak. I glanced at her and, with a look of disdain, stood up. Just as I was about to say something further, my phone buzzed cheerfully in my hand. Slowly, I read out the unfamiliar number and looked at her. "It's your little lover," I said. Her terrified expression told me I was right. "Sincere, don't answer," she pleaded, struggling to get up but collapsing again after kneeling too long. I watched her pitiful state without a trace of emotion as I answered the call and switched to speakerphone. Ethan's frenzied voice burst out immediately. "Sincere, you bastard, why don't you just die? Give Victoria back to me." "Shut up, Ethan," Victoria screamed, breaking down. I sneered, crouching elegantly beside her. "Ethan, do you really want to see her so badly?" I asked with deliberate calm. "I'll make it happen." Ethan's voice turned hoarse with a growl. "Sincere, what are you trying to do?" "Don't rush," I said, slipping my phone into my pocket. Then, without hesitation, I reached into Victoria's pocket. Her entire body stiffened, her wide eyes fixed on me. I pulled out her phone, unlocked it with ease, and scrolled through her contacts. Soon enough, I found Ethan's number in her block list and called him via video. "What are you doing, Sincere?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. I gave her a look that said, "Just wait." The video connected. Ethan's voice lit up with excitement. "Vicky, you're finally talking to me again." But when he saw me on the screen, his handsome face instantly twisted with rage. "Sincere, you shameless bastard. We've already slept together, and you still won't let go?" Ethan roared. "Ethan, shut the hell up, you jerk," Victoria snapped, lunging for her phone. I, however, swiftly raised it out of her reach and turned the camera toward her. "Ethan, your woman is kneeling at my hotel door begging for my forgiveness," I said with a smirk. "Look around. These people are all witnesses." I spun the phone to capture the bystanders, then added with a grin, "You tell me, shouldn't I give her another chance since she's worked so hard for it?" Ethan froze on the other end of the line before his expression twisted. Further, "Sincere, you're a monster. Don't you dare." I cut him off with an amused laugh. "Why wouldn't I dare? Don't forget, legally I'm still her husband. You're just some side piece who doesn't even have a seat at the table." Before Ethan could spiral into another fit of rage, I ended the video call and handed the phone back to Victoria. She knelt there, motionless, her eyes flickering with a faint glimmer of hope as she looked at me. It was then I realized that the lies I had used to provoke Ethan had also deceived her. I threw the phone at her feet, abruptly stood up and said coldly, "Victoria, don't delude yourself. Everything I just said was to fool an idiot like him. If you know what's good for you, get lost while I still have some patience." Before leaving, I added mockingly, "Oh, and by the way, I just broke your little lover's spirit. You'd better go comfort him before you lose both the man and the game." Laughing heartily, I walked away. Only then did Victoria realize that everything I'd said was a lie. She lost control, her cries of anguish filling the air like an invisible tidal wave drowning her. She could only cover her face with her hands and sob hysterically. After my mom was discharged from the hospital, she urged me to return to Paris right away. I had planned to stay a few more days with her, finishing up a week's worth of work overnight. Seeing her so energetic, I felt reassured. Before I left, she held my hand and said, "Sincere, that wretched Victoria is the reason I ended up in the hospital. You must never soften your heart and fall for her tricks again." "Don't worry, Mom," I replied. "I won't forgive her this time. But I am curious, what exactly did Victoria do?" At the mention of her name, my mom's face darkened, and she snapped, "That shameless woman knelt outside our house for 2 days begging me and Uncle G for forgiveness. All the neighbors know it's because she... What kind of thing would kneel and refuse to move? Almost had me laughing to death. I've never been humiliated like this before." Hearing this, I quickly comforted my mom. She lives in a rural hometown, having been strong-willed her entire life, but she fears others gossiping behind her back the most. In a rural area like that, rumors spread like wildfire. Victoria's antics had clearly infuriated her. I said, "Mom, don't be angry. I'll talk to Victoria and make sure she doesn't bother you and Uncle G anymore." At my words, my mom immediately warned me, "Sincere, it's fine if I endure a little, but don't you dare forgive her again. You're handsome, capable, and full of potential. I believe you'll find someone much better." Her words made my eyes sting, and only after I vowed repeatedly did she seem reassured. I wanted to take her back home, but she refused to stay in New York any longer. "Sincere," she said, "you've got the divorce agreement, right? Go back to Paris. That guy works at the space agency. He won't be able to leave the country without approval. This way you can start fresh." I had no choice but to rent her a car and told her to text me when she arrived safely. After sending her off, I checked the time for the divorce appointment. There was still plenty of time. I tried to reach Victoria, but her phone remained unreachable. I decided to head home to check if she had signed the divorce agreement. However, the moment I stepped inside, I found Victoria passed out by the entrance. I nudged her with my foot, but she didn't stir. Left with no choice, I crouched down and carried her to the couch. Feeling her forehead, I realized she had a fever. I didn't bother tending to her and instead used her phone to send a text to Ethan. "Darling, I have a fever. Can you come take care of me?" The reply came quickly. Ethan was already on his way. I could imagine how thrilled he must be. As I searched the house, I eventually found the shredded divorce agreement in the bedroom trash bin. Fury overtook me, and I kicked the trash can across the room. The noise startled Victoria awake in the living room. "Sincere, is that you?" she asked weakly. I stormed out, holding the shredded papers. "Victoria, what the hell are you trying to do?" Her gaze was filled with hurt as she tried to sit up but lacked the strength. I closed my eyes briefly and said coldly, "Forget it. Since you're awake now, let's go to the courthouse and finalize the divorce." In the end, we didn't manage to get the divorce certificate. By then, I figured Ethan must have arrived. Furious, I slammed the door and left. As I got into a cab, Victoria chased after it, running until she tripped, then got back up and ran again, looking utterly disheveled. She didn't stop until Ethan arrived and pulled her into his arms. I smirked bitterly. "Some people really never change," I murmured. Back in Paris, I headed straight to the office. After over 10 hours without proper rest, I was utterly drained. By the time Sarah brought in a cup of coffee, I was leaning on my desk, massaging my temples. Hearing her approach, I opened my eyes. "Sir, coffee," she said softly, placing it in front of me. I took a sip, and whether it was psychological or not, I instantly felt refreshed. "Thanks," I said, half joking. This coffee just saved my life. My attempt at humor made Sarah laugh. That evening, Sarah drove us home. We lived in the same villa. She occupied the first floor, while I stayed on the second. The space was large enough that we rarely saw each other unless we made an effort to. Tonight, however, Sarah had prepared a homemade dinner and invited me downstairs to eat. I initially wanted to refuse but didn't want to reject her kind gesture. The food was delicious and I couldn't help but glance at her a few times. After dinner, I volunteered to clean up before heading to bed. As I lay down, Jason texted me, I know you're feeling down. A good meal in a foreign land can at least comfort your wounded heart." I chuckled wryly. I had suspected Jason was the one orchestrating this behind the scenes. As the night deepened, I finally started to feel sleepy. Just as I was about to drift off, loud knocking jolted me awake. "Sir, you still awake?" Sarah's voice called out. "What's wrong?" I asked, quickly getting dressed and stepping out. She looked visibly upset and pulled me outside. "Sir, there's a fellow countrywoman kneeling at the gate. A crowd of locals has already gathered to watch. She's probably here for you." I immediately knew who it was. My temples throbbed with frustration. When I saw Victoria, I didn't mince words. "Weren't you unable to leave the country?" Her body trembled slightly, and an uncontrollable excitement shone on her face. "Sincere, you care about me." I rolled my eyes. "I'm just wondering how the space agency allowed you to leave the country to wreak havoc here." The light in her eyes dimmed instantly. She lowered her head and murmured, "I didn't file for approval. I left the country without permission. Sincere, please, just give me one more chance." Her voice was filled with pain and desperation as she looked up at me. I frowned and walked down the stairs, grabbing her arm to pull her inside. "Victoria, is your dignity worth so little? Can't you see how many people are filming this? Do you really want to make a name for yourself on the internet?" Victoria didn't care about things like that. She had already lost her husband. What did she have left to fear? If anything, she wished everyone could see the lengths she was willing to go to win him back. But as for me, I cared very much about appearances. So Victoria had no choice but to follow my lead, even if that meant being dragged along like a little chick. Yet, she seemed oddly happy because for her, even this was better than me avoiding her altogether. The moment we stepped inside the villa, Victoria realized I wasn't living alone. There were feminine belongings scattered around. Her heart clenched, and though she wanted to ask me about it, one look at my expression turned her curiosity into a self-deprecating smile. The desire to hold me, to claim me, grew uncontrollably inside her. She inched closer, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing so deep it could drown someone. I stared back at her, my gaze already brimming with impatience and anger. "Victoria, if you dare take one more step toward me, I'll call the Department of Astronomy and report you." Just that one sentence was enough to extinguish all the courage she had just mustered. She froze, standing exactly 1 meter away from me, not daring to move a muscle. Before my patience ran out completely, she reached into her bag, pulled out a star registry certificate, and handed it to me with both hands. Her voice was full of hope as she said, "Sincere, look, I named a star after you. Look, please." I gave it a cursory glance and scoffed. "Victoria, are you stupid, or do you think I am? A fake certificate claiming you named a star after me. Are you trying to be funny? Discovering a new star isn't that simple. Even if you did find one, it'd be all over the news. Do you think it'd be this quiet?" A flicker of panic passed through her eyes, and she hurried to explain. "Sincere, I swear I'll make this certificate real. Just give me some time. I promise. I'll fix everything. I'll get the official certificate for you. I'll take you on a road trip through the southwestern loop. I'll prove to you that I love you, that my heart belongs to you alone. My husband can only be you. Please, Sincere, just give me a chance, even if it's just a little one." Her words were raw, every sentence dripping with emotion. If I hadn't known her for 12 years already, I might have been moved by her plea tonight. I looked up from my phone, smirking at her. "Have you finished your speech? Good. Now go back to Washington. The Department of Astronomy's leadership is probably losing their minds trying to find you." Victoria froze for a moment, her face draining of color. Then, with a voice full of despair, she asked, "Sincere, did you really report me? Do you hate me that much?" I interrupted her without hesitation. "Don't accuse me of things I didn't do. It was your little lover who reported you." Hearing this, Victoria immediately pulled out her phone. She had turned it off earlier to avoid being disturbed. Now the flood of missed calls and unread messages was enough to make her phone freeze. Her chest heaved with anger, and without saying another word, she rushed to the airport. It was only after she left that Sarah emerged from the kitchen. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked. I waved her off and headed upstairs. "If she comes again, just call the cops and report a trespasser." When Victoria landed back in New York, she didn't head to the Department of Astronomy. Instead, she went straight home. The moment she walked through the door, Ethan, shirtless, pulled her into his arms. "Vicky, I knew you'd come back to me. No one in this world loves you more than I do." Her face darkened as she pushed him away. Ethan, startled, reached for her again, but she slapped him hard across the face, sending him stumbling into the shoe rack by the entryway. "Ethan," she spat, "what do you gain from ruining me?" In that moment, she hated him with every fiber of her being. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him close, her eyes burning with a fury that could cut him into 1,000 pieces. Ethan stared at her in terror before letting out a low, bitter laugh. "What do I gain? If I didn't ruin you, would you have come back to me so easily?" "You bastard," she shouted. Ethan's laugh turned hollow, tears streaming down his face. "A bastard, huh? But didn't you enjoy yourself in bed with this bastard? You even drove your husband away. Victoria, you deserve this." His face was already swelling from the slap, but he kept talking as if hurting her with his words could somehow ease his own pain. Victoria slapped him again, this time so hard it split his lip. But she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were red with rage as she thought about how she had lost her career, her husband, all because of this man. The hatred inside her grew, consuming her entirely. She shoved him toward the door, dragging him outside with all her strength. "If you're so shameless and determined to ruin my life, then don't think you'll get off easy." Ethan struggled to break free, but his half-dressed state only made him a spectacle for the onlookers outside. Panic set in as he realized the scene he was causing. He begged, his voice raw and desperate. "Vicky, I was wrong. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please don't do this to me." But Victoria didn't listen. She threw him into the car and began driving toward the Department of Astronomy. Ethan continued to plead, and when that didn't work, he tried to call the police. Victoria snatched Ethan's phone and hurled it straight out the window. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, and the car shot forward like an arrow leaving the bow. Just as Ethan was on the verge of fainting from fear, Victoria abruptly brought the car to a halt. A crowd of people immediately poured out of the observatory. Victoria's boss, upon spotting her, hurried over with a mix of worry and frustration. "Victoria, how could you leave the country without permission? You're one of our core team members. The higher-ups know about this, and they're planning to sideline you. Come with me to the director's office and apologize sincerely. There's still a slim chance to fix this." The boss grabbed Victoria and began dragging her toward the office. Stumbling slightly, Victoria steadied herself, then stopped in her tracks. The boss turned back, glaring at her with a mix of urgency and confusion. "Victoria?" Victoria's voice was steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm sorry, sir. I've let you down." Tears welled in her eyes as she bowed her head in apology. The boss, bewildered, followed the gazes of the onlooking colleagues and finally noticed Ethan, who was nearly naked. "What is going on here?" The boss gasped in shock. Victoria walked back and grabbed Ethan, announcing loudly, "Ethan, this scumbag is one of my subordinates. He seduced me, which caused me to divorce my husband and lose my family." Ethan stammered, "No, that's not true. Please, Victoria, let me go. I promise I won't bother you again." He pleaded with her desperately, clutching himself in shame. But Victoria's cold smile only deepened. "Not only did this jerk flirt with me, but while playing games with me, he seduced the wife of a major figure in the city and even climbed into her bed. Such a shameless man deserves the wrath of everyone." The colleagues were already stunned by the explosive revelations. Victoria, however, was not done. "Today I'm exposing all of this for 2 reasons. To rid the world of this scumbag and to show my resolve to my husband who is far away. Even if he never forgives me, I will love him forever." Cameras were everywhere, filming her declaration. Amid the chaos, police cars and the city's powerful figure himself arrived simultaneously. Victoria and Ethan were taken away in the police cars, while the powerful man never stepped out of his vehicle, merely following them to the station. No one knew who this powerful figure was, but they all understood one thing: Ethan was finished. His career was over, and there was no way he could remain in the city. 2 days later, thanks to the relentless efforts of her boss, Victoria was released. However, her parents, upon learning of their daughter's actions, publicly disowned her. The incident caused a severe backlash, and despite Victoria's significant contributions, the observatory ultimately decided to terminate her employment. Victoria lost her job, her former glory, and her family. She became utterly alone. Taking a 6-pack of beer, she climbed onto her rooftop, drinking and talking to the bright moon in the sky. A faint smile lingered on her lips, but tears streamed down her face the entire time. The incident dominated the news, with repeated coverage. Victoria didn't believe that Sincere hadn't heard about it. Yet he remained silent, no words of sympathy, not even a meaningless gesture of concern. Still, Victoria had no regrets. She had brought this upon herself. Ethan vanished from the streets of New York, but Victoria knew that on the day of the incident, it was the powerful man's wife who had taken him away. A woman like her, dependent on such a ruthless man, wouldn't let Ethan off so easily. His fate could only be 1,000 times worse than hers. I had indeed seen the news, but to me it was nothing more than a joke. Work in Paris was going smoothly, and I was gradually adapting to life here. On my days off, I enjoyed sitting in a cozy little cafe in the alley, ordering a coffee and a slice of cake, watching people pass by. Life felt serene. One sunny afternoon, as I sipped my coffee and read a book, my phone rang. It was a call from Victoria. We hadn't been in touch for a long time, and hearing her voice again, I noticed it sounded rough, as if scraped by sandpaper. "Sincere, I really miss you," she said. I furrowed my brows slightly, holding the phone a little farther away. Taking a sip of coffee, I calmly replied, "Have you signed the divorce papers? If you have, send them to my home or my office. Don't contact me unless it's necessary." Victoria was silent for a moment. Just as I was about to hang up, she suddenly spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, and then I heard a sob on the other end. Her voice broke, filled with despair, as if she had lost everything. "Sincere, please give me another chance, okay? I'll do whatever you want, just please don't leave me. We've been together for 12 years. Are you really going to abandon it all? How am I supposed to live without you? I've already confessed all the mistakes of my past to the public. I'm willing to bear the insults and judgment of everyone. Doesn't that make up for some of my wrongs?" I couldn't help but laugh. Upon hearing my laugh, Victoria's sobbing stopped abruptly. In a panic, she asked, "Sincere, why are you laughing?" I closed my book, nestled comfortably into the sofa, and said lightly, "Victoria, you're still the same. After all these years, this is how you deal with your mistakes. You're so certain that I love you, that as long as you shed a few tears, I'll feel sorry for you and forgive you. And you know what? You were right back then, I always did. But have you ever considered that I don't love you anymore?" Victoria froze in place, then broke down and screamed, "No, I don't believe it. Sincere, I don't believe you when you say you don't love me anymore. You used to love me so much. How could that love just disappear? I only made a small mistake. I've already admitted I was wrong. Why won't you give me another chance to make it right?" Hearing this, I knew she still hadn't realized her mistake. In her mind, as long as she made herself pitiful enough, I was obligated to forgive her and take her back. Over the years, I had grown so tired. Now there was nothing left to say to Victoria. Rubbing my temples, I said coldly, "Victoria, please stop interfering in my life. Since you've agreed to sign the divorce papers, I'll file for divorce after the 2-year separation period." As soon as I finished speaking, I hung up the phone, unwilling to listen to any more of her nonsense. Time flew by, and soon it was late autumn. Jason's wedding date was fast approaching. After wrapping up my work in Paris, I returned home 3 days early. I stayed by Jason's side, helping with all the wedding preparations. It was more exhausting than working nonstop for 2 weeks. Jason leaned in close and teased me. "Sir, you've been working so hard. When it's your turn to get married, I'll be just as busy helping you." I slumped on the couch, waving a fist at him. "You're asking for it, aren't you? Who am I going to marry, huh?" Jason dodged away and shot Sarah a knowing wink from the corner of his eye. I sat up, following his gaze, and immediately snapped, "Jason, are you looking to get yourself killed?" Between the banter and laughter, the wedding day finally arrived. I didn't expect to see Victoria at Jason's wedding. My expression darkened, but I also understood. Victoria and I had been together for so long that we shared too many mutual friends. As I entered the wedding venue, I saw Victoria dressed in a white cocktail dress, clutching a bouquet of red roses. People passing by cast glances her way, but she seemed oblivious. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up. Step by step, she walked toward me. I stared at her, realizing she looked thinner than before, her complexion pale. After the Ethan incident, Victoria had lost her job and her reputation. She was no longer the confident, dazzling star she once was. Our mutual friends all avoided her now. Jason had eagerly gossiped about this the day after I returned. I felt no sympathy, only the thought that Victoria had brought this upon herself. Since that phone call, I hadn't answered any of her calls. I had been living freely in Paris, enjoying life. Aside from Jason and Monica, I wasn't willing to waste energy on anyone irrelevant. Victoria looked at me, handsome and radiant as always, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that she could finally see the man she had been longing for, sorrow at the happiness radiating around me, so starkly contrasting with her own despair. Her eyes held a glimmer of hope as she hesitated and finally spoke, sincere after all this time. "Are you still mad at me? I truly love you. I can't live without you." I looked at her steadily. Back in college, whenever I saw a wedding on the street, I would buy a rose and give it to Victoria. I had no idea how I would feel seeing her again, anger, annoyance, or even disgust. But to my surprise, I felt nothing at all. Work had kept me busy, and I had made many friends. My wallet was fuller, and so was my sense of contentment. "Sir, come take a photo," Jason called from inside. I raised a hand and waved toward him. Before leaving, I turned to Victoria and said seriously, "Victoria, stop wasting your time on meaningless things. We both need to move forward." Her face turned even paler, her body swaying as if she might collapse. I ignored her and walked past her to join the photo session. People move forward. Flowers bloom toward the sun. No one will wait for you where you stand. After a week back home, Jason hurriedly pushed me to return to Paris. Before leaving, I spent a few days at home, cherishing time with my mom. In the end, it was my mom who urged me to leave, worried I might give Victoria another chance to pester me. Right before my plane took off, Victoria's name lit up on my phone screen. I hesitated for a few seconds but didn't answer. When my plane landed in Paris, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ethan, screaming and sobbing on the other end, vowing to make me pay. Through his broken words, I pieced together that, in a twisted act of revenge, Ethan had crashed his car into Victoria's. He also planned to take his own life. I responded indifferently, "She's your woman. Whether she lives or dies has nothing to do with me. Do whatever makes you happy." The final bad news came from Jason. The day I flew out, Victoria had sped toward the airport in a frenzy. On the way, Ethan's car had slammed into hers from the side, sending her vehicle plunging into the North Shore Bay. That last call she made was the final one of her life, but I hadn't answered. I stared blankly at my computer screen. The North Shore Bay, it was the very place where Victoria had once saved me. Our story had begun there, and now it had ended there too. 3 days before Victoria's funeral, my mom asked me if I planned to attend. I thought for a moment and then said no, my relationship with her isn't strong enough for me to fly back to attend her funeral. After hanging up the phone, I looked at the morning sunlight. It felt as if everything could start anew. People need to move forward, not get stuck in the dreams of the past. You should live with more clarity and greater resolve as you go on.